To introduce our speakers today for our seminar on brain health. Melissa Lopez, MSN, RN, is a nurse practitioner at the Weill Cornell Medicine Parkinson's Disease and Movement Disorder Institute. She graduated from Hunter College with her master's degree in nursing. She has prior experience in inpatient palliative care and was a surgical critical care nurse for over 7 years. Her interests include preventive medicine, integrative health and wellness, and holistic nursing care. Natalie Hellmers, PhD RN, is also a nurse practitioner at the Weill Cornell Medicine Parkinson's Disease and Movement Disorder Institute. She graduated from New York University with her PhD in nursing research and has studied the work-life balance of family caregivers of adults with Parkinson's disease. Her research interests include caregiver well-being, using technology in education, learning and monitoring mobility and lifestyle medicine. Both Melissa and Natalie provide expert clinical evaluations and treatment for movement disorders, including Parkinson's disease. They are the moderators of several support groups and are co-investigators on numerous clinical trials at Weill Cornell Medicine. Please join me in welcoming Melissa and Natalie.
Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to see you all here. I do recognize some familiar faces and some new ones. So Melissa and I are delighted to be here today. So as we begin, right, we're focusing on brain health today. And we actually have quite a number of things we'd like to cover. And it's a lot, and to be realistic with you, we could probably dive deeply into all of these and spend a lot of time talking about them individually. But we're going to give you this summary today, and at the end, if there are topics of interest or further questions, we'll be happy to go into it. And who knows, maybe the Patient Resource Center will invite us back, and we'll do this again on another focused topic of interest. So. For today, we're going to start by talking about what does it mean to be healthy. We're going to talk about what exactly is a healthy brain. We're going to take a look inside the brain. We'll discuss ways to keep the brain healthy. A little bit about vitamins, nutrition, sleep, exercise, and also talk about preventive medicine. And we'll share with you a bit about our supportive care clinic that we have going on in our practice. All right, so to start us off, I'd like you all to think about this. What does it mean to be healthy? Right, so we have two potential definitions on this slide. On the left, having energy, vitality. On the right, not having health issues or problems. And this is a question I've been thinking about for a while. And the magnitude of this question didn't really dawn on me until a few years ago. I read a book called In the Kingdom of the Sick, A Social History of Chronic Illness. It's by a health writer named Lori Edwards. And she wrote about how millions of Americans suffer with chronic illness. And many of these people went through a very long process to get their diagnosis, and then once they got their diagnosis, the cure wasn't always available, and as a matter of fact, it was rarely available. And what really struck me about this book was the introduction. The author included a quote from Suzanne Sontag from the 1970s, who states, "Everyone who is born holds dual citizenship in the kingdom of the well and in the kingdom of the sick." And I thought that was really powerful, right? Because if you think about that quote, now that we think about the description on the right, the one on the right may not be realistic, right? We are human, we are vulnerable, we are likely to develop some kind of condition, and of course the risks for injury, right? Especially if we think about the brain, they're really present. But if we strive for, seeking out energy and vitality, right? That definition on the right, then on my right, your left, on the left, then despite illness and injury, we can actually find ways to adapt and manage this really well. So, moving forward, what is a healthy brain? Now, because everybody's been talking about artificial intelligence these days, which is kind of making many people nervous to think that maybe one day we won't even have to use our brains anymore. We're just going to have the computer do all the work for us. So what I did was I said, let me check my computer. Let me check ChatGPT about telling me what is the definition of a healthy brain. And I actually got back something pretty decent, right? So the computer told me that a healthy brain refers to a brain that functions optimally, is free from disease, injury, or impairment. Some characteristics include cognitive function, physical health, emotional well-being, stress management, and mental health. Overall, a healthy brain is characterized by its ability to function effectively, adapt to changes, and support overall well-being. Right? So it's actually a mouthful of many different pieces about what is a healthy brain. I wanted to compare that with the World Health Organization's definition of what is a healthy brain. And there, the definition comes up as brain health is the state of brain functioning across cognitive, sensory, social, emotional, behavioral, and motor domains, allowing a person to realize their full potential over the life course, irrespective of the presence or absence of disorders. Right? So I think that last line is really important, right? Irrespective of the presence or absence of having a disorder, right? So the healthy brain, the goal of having a healthy brain, regardless of maybe what a condition a person may be dealing with. So, moving on, the brain over the life course, just to talk a little bit about this for a few minutes, right? So our brains continuously develop from birth and into adulthood. And there are key periods in childhood where our brains are more malleable, right? And that's that key time in a very young childhood where, we are very sensitive and susceptible to both positive and negative experiences, which is why it's so important, right? We want to keep children safe. We want to give them a nice, positive environment, because we know that the experiences then will definitely have an effect, on the person as an adult later on. And, if you think about it, right, we have 100 billion of neurons, and they let messages flow back and forth between the brain and body all the time. I think that's really important to keep in mind, right? Because the communication between the brain and the body is like bi-directional, right? So our brains send out signals for our bodies to carry out the tasks that it does, but the brain is constantly sensing the environment that we have all around us, right? And these sensations are very tactile, right? If, let's say, we touch something on the stove and it's hot, right? Our brain is going to remember this happened, and we learn about it, we store that memory, and then hopefully we never do it again, right? I once heard one of our externs in our group, in our neuropsychology group, give a talk about mindful meditation, and was discussing what happens to the brain over the life course. And he used the word pruning. So that word struck my mind. I really like the word pruning because it's an excellent way of describing what happens to those cells over time, right? Especially from youth into adulthood. So we lose synaptic connections because we don't need them, right? So it's like our brain is automatically pruning things for us. So I give you this example. If, let's say, you learned French or Spanish in high school, but you never studied those languages again, right? Those connections you have made probably have been pruned by now, which is why, you don't speak French or Spanish anymore, right? And certainly we wish, right? Wouldn't it be fantastic if we could remember everything we ever read, everything we've ever experienced? But the brain, as magnificent as it is, and maybe that's a survival tactic too, right? Because if we were constantly flooded with so much, we'd probably be on overdrive, right? So the pruning concept is, I think that's kind of important to keep in mind, especially when we think about, why don't we have all the memories that we have? So now we are going to take a look inside the brain. Now I have a question for the audience. Do you think the brain is considered a muscle?
Yes.
Okay, we have one person in the audience says yes. Anybody else? Do we agree? So, believe it or not, the brain is actually 60% fat. The remaining is a combination of water. There's actually a lot of water in that little bit there. Protein, carbohydrates, and salts. So it's not actually a muscle, but I think it's important to think of it like a muscle, right? When we think about we exercise, we flex our muscles, we build our muscles. And so, metaphorically, thinking of the brain as a muscle, I think is great. But ironically, it's made up of a lot of different things that we don't even think about on a regular basis, right? And we have blood vessels and neurons. And all of it form that extraordinary network. And some of this communication is understood, and a lot of it still isn't. Right? We're still trying to figure out, what happens when brain cells die. What happens to people who have like addictive habits? What happens to people who overeat? Are there ways to retrain the brain into fixing these issues? So, just taking a peek at the brain, we're going to do just a brief. Take you back to anatomy and physiology 101, right? So we have the cerebellum, that's the little brain, and that's like the fist-sized portion of the brain that's located right in the back of the head. That's what coordinates voluntary muscle movement to maintain posture, balance, and equilibrium. And then if you look at the slide over there, we have 4 sections called lobes. The frontal lobe, right, easy to remember because it's just at the front. It's the largest, and it's responsible for personality and executive function, right? So super, super important part of the brain. Then we have the parietal lobe, that's like in the middle, and it helps us identify objects and understand spatial relationships. Here we are able to interpret pain and touch. And it's the area that houses the place where we understand human language. So also very important. Then there's the occipital lobe, and that is the part of the brain that is involved in vision. So if something is going wrong in that area, if there's an injury in that area, a person can have perfectly healthy eyes, but there will be a vision problem. So another important part of the brain that we want to take good care of. And then we have the temporal lobe, which is involved in short-term memory, speech. If you are gifted in music and you're very rhythmic, you can thank that part of the brain. And there's also some degree of smell recognition happening there. So now we're getting deeper, and perhaps some of this is maybe not the most exciting because there's a lot of terminology happening here. But again, just to give you a brief walk into the deep core of the brain. We have that little pituitary gland, which is pea-sized, and oddly enough, they call it the master gland. It's found deep in the brain, just behind the bridge of the nose, and it governs the functions of other glands in the body. So it regulates the flow of hormones from other areas, such as the thyroid, right? That's an important part of the body, too. It receives chemical signals from the other area called the hypothalamus. That regulates your body temperature, it synchronizes your sleep, and controls hunger and thirst. It also has a role in memory and emotion. The amygdala, which we can see just there at the bottom, that is associated with the fight and flight response. So we're going to actually talk about that a little later when Melissa covers the portion about stress. So remember fight or flight. And then we have the pineal gland. That's where we see the secretion of melatonin. Melatonin is something also very important. Perhaps some of you are familiar with it. We'll talk a little bit about that more when we talk about sleep. So now another question for the audience. Does anybody want to take a stab as to how much does the brain weigh? I see a hand.
3 pounds, 2.5, 3 pounds.
You got it, very good. So it's approximately 3 pounds. And so there in that 3 pounds, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of pieces, lots of parts that all have their own role. Now we're going to talk a little bit about how to keep those 3 pounds really healthy. We're going to go over lifestyle patterns, routines. We're going to talk a little bit about vitamins that are important specifically for the brain. We're going to go into nutrition, sleep, exercise, and preventive medicine, as well as stress management. So, routines. This slide, I think, everybody can relate to some degree or other, because we either have routines or we don't, right? So some of us are, we wake up at the same time, we go to bed around the same time. For the brain, it's actually more helpful to stick to routines. The brain sort of likes that. Putting things away in the same place. Now, some of us are better at that than others, but that's a big piece, to not putting more pressure and stressor on the brain, because if you keep putting your keys away in different places, chances are it will be harder to remember that. Minimizing things, sort of simplifying life, is a great way to help the brain just function better. And then as far as routines go, practicing, studying, reading, writing, right? Even if we're done with school and we've graduated and we never want to think about, that again, actually incorporating that type of routine in your life, it helps the brain, right? And even as far as studying goes, if we do want to learn something new, right, we can always strive to learn new languages. We may not be as good as that as we maybe would have been when we were in our youth, in our childhood. Again, like I mentioned, as children, we're more malleable, but the opportunity to learn is still there, regardless of how long it takes. I can tell you, I think I've been studying French for the last 10 years, and it's going very, very slowly. Vitamins. I think this is a big topic, and I feel like once you hear about this, you're going to be thinking about other vitamins, but just focusing on these two. So B12 is essential for the formation of a protective sheath around the nerves, and it helps in the production of the neurotransmitters, the chemicals that we need, and it's really important for brain function. Now, oddly enough, B12, if you just looking at this current statistics, a lot of people are low in B12. This seems to be like a national thing across the board. Probably because while B12 is found in animal foods, it's not really found in plants. It is found in fortified cereals, but not everybody eats fortified cereals, right? So this is definitely one of those vitamins that, if you know you're low, and the best way to find out, of course, is you go to your primary care, or if you're seeing a neurologist, check in, right, and say, well, what are my labs? If a person has a neurological condition, the B12 gets even a little bit more important. So as Melissa and I are in movement disorders, right, we work in a very special subcategory of neurology. We like to know that the people that we're taking care of are a bit above, not just like, low normal, but a little higher, right? Because we've found that research suggests that range is important. Vitamin D, I feel like it's been on the news. They were talking about it on Channel 4 a couple of mornings ago. Vitamin D, it helps regulate the production of neurotransmitters, and it protects neurons. A deficiency has been associated with an increased risk of cognitive impairment, even changes to the point of, there's a correlation between a dementia risk. So vitamin D is important. You definitely don't want to overload on vitamin D, because there is such a thing as a vitamin D toxicity. 4,000 units is way beyond what the body actually needs. And it's a similar story to the B12. Like I mentioned, right, it's good to know your level. Same thing with vitamin D. Most New Yorkers are low. It's probably because today's a beautiful sunny day, but when we don't get sun or the buildings are tall, there's a lot of shadow. And then, of course, if you're not feeling great, you're spending more time indoors, you're probably not getting enough vitamin D. So checking the level, and then if it's low, the the ways to replete it is just taking oral vitamin D. Most people, I guess most adults, it's about 400 units according to the NIH, but that number goes up as you get older. So if somebody is 50 or over, for example, if you look at the Centrum multivitamin for women, if you're over 50, the units will be 500 of vitamin D already in that multivitamin, right? And I think by default, commercially, most people end up just taking either a 500 or 1,000 because that's the one that's like most available. Again, it's great to know the number, and then that blood level decides, how much a person should really be taking. So keep in mind B12 and D. I'm going to do kind of a run through of these 10 points about nutrition. Again, nutrition is huge. We're learning a lot more about it these days, and I could probably talk to you for hours about this particular topic. So brief summary, what we think are the most important points. So number 1, fruits and vegetables, right? We want to aim for color. The brighter, the better. You're going to get more vitamins out of it. As far as whole grains, we're thinking about things like brown rice, quinoa, which has a lot of iron in it, whole grain bread, healthy fats like fatty fish, salmon. Not everybody likes sardines, but they are good for you. Nuts such as walnuts and almonds. We have seeds, chia seeds. All of these contain omega-3 and omega-6, which are really important for the brain. Then we have our lean proteins, so that's poultry, eggs, tofu. The thing about the American diet, right, is that we have a lot of lean, we have a lot of red meats, and the quantity tends to be a bit more than people should be having. And so lately, there's a really big trend into encouraging people to go more plant-based. And this is supposed to be a game changer for brain health, right? So it's not that you shouldn't have protein. You need the protein, but perhaps if you can get it from those other sources, those leaner sources. And that's a potential way to avoid inflammation, cardiovascular disease, and so on. Hydration, right? Remember I mentioned earlier the brain's got a lot of water, you have to keep it hydrated. If you're dehydrated, you're not going to be as alert, you're going to feel fatigued and tired, and dehydration sneaks up very quickly on people. Limiting processed foods and added sugars, moderate alcohol consumption, right? So if you do drink alcohol, moderation, that's the key for the brain. Spices and herbs, so incorporating, turmeric, cinnamon, ginger, all of these things into your cooking, right? This is going to help also decrease inflammation. And plus it'll make dinner taste better. We want to think about balance, right? That's point number 10. Focusing on balance in your diet to ensure you're getting a nice wide range of everything. And finally, sleep. Now, I'm sure if we went around the room, perhaps everybody's had some issues in this category, right? It's almost like to sleep well, you sort of have to know how to do it. Sleep is so important for the brain. This is another subtopic that we can go into. First of all, sleep restores, it repairs. There's memory consolidation that goes on when we sleep. It improves our cognitive function and our mood, our physical health. It actually helps to detoxify the brain, and they say people who sleep better are on the better track to healthy aging. In studies that looked at safety and performance in those who work, especially if they're operating heavy machinery, sleep is vital, right? Because if you're going into your job tired, you will not perform as well. And overall well-being, right? That kind of sums it all up, right? If you sleep well and if you have a better night, you'll be overall in a better place. And to add some suggestions specifically from our Weill Cornell Sleep Center, we had Dr. Dan Barone join our group a couple of months ago, and he gave a really great presentation and just some of the take-home points that we keep emphasizing in our practice, right? Maintaining a consistent sleep schedule. It's exactly what I was saying before about the routines, creating a comfortable sleep environment, practice relaxation techniques before bedtime, and limiting exposure to electronic devices, which is really hard, right? Because we live with our phones now. They're practically a member of our family. So not to scroll before you go to bed, not to put the TV on before you go to bed, and really let your mind, let that brain like slow down a little bit and not be overstimulated.
Great, so now I'll talk a little bit about exercise and the importance of it. So exercise is proven to have neuroprotective benefits in the brain. So 2.5 hours per week showed a slow decline in the quality of life, can improve motor and non-motor Parkinson's symptoms. Molecular mechanisms of exercise benefits affects neuroplasticity in the brain. So the ability of the brain to, neuroplasticity is the ability of the brain to change and compensate for loss of dopamine neurons. The mouse model showed that exercise did not affect the amount of dopamine in the brain, but it allowed for more efficient use of dopamine through modification of areas of the brain where dopamine signals are received. Neuroprotective benefits in the mouse model showed that mice that exercised for 3 months had significantly less alpha-synuclein aggregation than sedentary mice. So a little bit about the alpha-synuclein aggregation. This is shown in several neurodegenerative disorders, including Parkinson's and Lewy body dementia. And then the dopamine. So dopamine is a type of neurotransmitter, and it also plays a role in how we feel and pleasure. It's a big part of our unique human ability to think and plan. It helps us strive, focus, and find things interesting. So high-intensity exercise can reverse neurodegeneration in Parkinson's disease and chronic illness in general. So Parkinson's disease is a neurodegenerative condition where cells get damaged, resulting in a loss of dopamine, an important neurotransmitter. Small proof of concept study involving 10 patients showed that high-intensity aerobic exercise preserved dopamine-producing neurons. After 6 months of exercise, neurons actually had grown healthier and produced stronger dopamine signals, as seen throughout specialized brain imaging. So a little bit about what is high-intensity exercise. So it's really the aerobic exercise. So you want to get in 3 to 5 days, depending on how long your sessions are, 30 minutes per session if you're doing 5 days a week, to cover the 2.5 hours per week. This includes rhythmic cycling, swimming, jogging, brisk walking, anything that really gets your heart rate up and a little sweat going on. Along with that, you want to add in some strength training, so some low weight-bearing activities, 2 to 3 times per week for about 30 minutes per session, 10 to 15 reps for major muscle groups, resistance training. This is light weights, 1 to 5 pound weights, doing 15 reps, about 30 minutes, 2 days a week. Along with that, you want to add in some balance, agility, and multitask training, 2 to 3 days a week. This would be like your Tai Chi, your yoga, and then stretching. You can do that before or after your aerobic activity. They actually have stretch labs now in New York, so I've heard wonderful things about that. First and foremost, safety is key. So we want to make sure that all of this aerobic activity is being done safely. So if you have questions or if you have concerns about balance, it's always good to talk to your movement disorder specialist, your primary care doctor, or your physical therapist to get a nice, good exercise regimen that's safe for you. And then, we modify as needed. You could see a physical therapist if you don't see one, if you are worried about your gait or your balance. They're really beneficial. And the 150 minutes per week is really what we're aiming for neuroprotective benefits of the brain. And just so you all know, because we do specialize in Parkinson's and movement disorders, so if you or anyone you know has Parkinson's or a movement disorder, there are a lot of free programs online because the aerobic activity is so beneficial. So some of them I listed here. Parkinson's Wellness Project, you can find a whole bunch of online workouts on their website. ADPA, daily exercise classes as well. Parkinson's Foundation has Fitness Fridays. Power for Parkinson's. Rocksteady Boxing is a really big one, offered all throughout the city, even in New Jersey and other states. Dance for PD, I've heard wonderful things about. It's a dancing class, also offered all throughout New York. And Beat Parkinson's Today, beatpdtoday.com. And most of them are free. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about stress. Structural changes in the brain, particularly in areas associated with memory, learning, and emotion regulation. Prolonged exposure to stress hormones such as cortisol can trick the hippocampus, a region crucial for for memory and spatial navigation. Stress can disrupt neurotransmitter systems in the brain, affecting mood, motivation, and cognitive function. Chronic stress can dysregulate the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which Natalie spoke about earlier. High levels of cortisol can damage effects on the brain. Stress activates the body's inflammatory response. This has been linked to various neurological conditions, including neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. Acute stress can temporarily enhance memory and cognitive function, the fight or flight response, but chronic stress can impair memory consolidation and cognitive performance. So we can handle acute stress, but not chronic stress. Now I'll talk a little bit about preventative medicine. So what are things we're trying to prevent? We're trying to prevent microvascular ischemia, risks for stroke, brain atrophy, inflammation, traumatic brain injury, and all the above plus muscle atrophy. Preventative medicine suggestions. So really important that you have a primary care provider that you're seeing at least every 6 months to once a year for your annual physicals, and you're getting your blood work, you're getting your vitamin D levels, your B12, making sure your blood pressure, blood sugars, and cholesterol are under really good control to help prevent any future cardiovascular events. So this can help prevent chronic illness or cardiovascular events. Also, just stay safe. Do home safety checks to prevent falls. A simple occupational therapist can come in and check the house for anything they think is at risk for like a safety issue, that they can make recommendations based on their assessment. Wear a seatbelt in the car, wear a bike helmet whenever you ride a bike. And just a little bit about the specialists that we have for the brain. So we have neurologists, but then we have specialists. So me and Natalie specialize in movement disorders. So you have Parkinson's, essential tremor, cervical dystonia, to name a few. Our neighbors next door, they specialize in memory disorders. We have neuromuscular specialists, epilepsy specialists, stroke neurologists. Neurogenetics is a big up-and-coming field. Neuro-opto, multiple sclerosis, neurointensive care, and neuropsychology. Okay, and this is a little bit about our supportive care plan that started in December. So the search for wellness. While there is no official framework for wellness in neurological disease, the general concept of this supportive care clinic was based on an updated model by the key components of wellness by Subramanian 2023. This figure is an updated version of a previous figure by Blom, suggesting that health is pursued holistically through individual lifestyle choices and not just the absence of disease. So this is the model we used in the supportive care clinic. We give this to everybody that comes in, and we really try to touch on each and every topic. Just a couple, so diet, exercise, sleep, meaning and purpose, social connections, intellectual engagement, mind-body approach, and optimized general medicine, so making sure everybody has a primary care or specialist that they need, just to name a few. So it's the LIFT Supportive Care and Wellness Program, which I said rolled out in December in our office. Stands for Lifestyle Improvement, Fitness, and Togetherness. So basically the meetings are one-on-one with the nurse practitioner and the social worker. Disorders that we treat included but are not limited to Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia, Lewy body dementia, vascular Parkinsonisms. We help connect our patients to resources including physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, mental health counseling, support groups that we offer. We offer a whole bunch of support groups, they're all wonderful. Exercise regimens, nutritionists, advanced care planning, so legal support if they need it, and educational classes including fall prevention, brain boosting activities. We have different ones every month. So this program aims to have a holistic approach, mind, body, spirit balance for optimal functioning and health. If you're interested, you can always just, if you want to write down this email or let us know before you leave, but it's wcm450@med.cornell.edu. You can send us an email there. So we already talked a little bit about this, a 1-hour visit. It's more of a holistic approach, and it's really lending a extra layer of support to the patient and their family member. It's completely separate from your follow-ups with the movement disorder doctor or nurse practitioner. All right, thank you for listening. We'll be glad to take any questions or feedback.